Hi everybody, I'm Paul and I'm here with Maggie and one of our favorite animal ambassadors, William the Wallaby. Now William is a Bennett's Wallaby, also called a red-necked Wallaby, and he lives here in Wild Encounters in our walk-through Wallaby yard. William is a hand-raised Wallaby, so he's a little bit more friendly than some of the other ones here that are a little bit more shy. When William was really little and he was in the pouch, his mom got kind of sick, and our veterinarians were worried that he might get that medication through her milk. So he was pulled and raised by the keepers. We made a little pouch out of sweatshirts for him that we carried him around in. And so now he really likes people. He's very social. He likes being around people, and he likes being around Maggie especially. That's one of his favorite people. So wallabies are found in the east coast, Bennett's wallabies are found on the east coast of Australia and then down into Tasmania as well. They're very common. They're all over the place. They're not endangered. And they're pretty widespread. So William is actually about 7 years and 9 months old. His birthday is July 1st, so he's almost 8. These guys can live to be about maybe between 11 and 15 is pretty good, so he's kind of middle-aged. So when these guys are first born, they're only about 2 centimeters long, so that's about the size of a jelly bean. And when they're first born, they crawl up into their mom's pouch, and they'll stay in that pouch for about 9 more months until they're fully weaned. And then they'll hop out and they'll kind of be on their own for a while. So one of the things you can notice about these guys, they have a lot of cool adaptations. So he's got a really long tail there. You can see that really strong, powerful tail. That works as a really good counterbalance for when they're hopping around. These guys are really, really good at jumping, and they're not so great at walking. They can walk pretty slow, but they can run really fast. Well, they can jump really fast, and they can jump really far. So they can actually jump about 25 feet horizontally, and they can jump about 6 feet vertically. Normally, when they're just doing kind of little hops, they'll hop about 6 feet at a time, which is still quite a bit, especially for a small animal like this. These guys are about 3 feet tall, and they actually are fully grown. This is as big as wallabies usually get. He's about 40 pounds. I think he's actually about 35 now. But kangaroos can get much, much larger. A lot of times when people come in here, we do hear them say, "Oh, look at all the baby kangaroos." They're not babies. They're actually adults. They're fully grown. Kangaroos can get a lot bigger. They can get up to between 100 and 150 pounds. A really big male can be between 5 and 6 feet. But again, these guys stay about this big, so they're pretty small. And one of the reasons they're small is because while kangaroos live in big open spaces, these guys tend to live in wooded areas. So they need to be able to sneak through the trees and the underbrush and not get caught in those branches. So right now you can see Maggie's giving him all sorts of fun treats. These are special things that he gets just for coming out and visiting with us today. But their normal diet is things like grass and leaves, and here we give them things like hay and some marsupial pellets, so kind of a compact alfalfa pellet, and then some fruits and veggies as a treat too. Do we have any questions about William the Wallaby?
What is the claw on his back foot for?
The claw on his back foot? Well, that claw is actually a toe. So he's got 4 toes in the back foot. One is just kind of vestigial, doesn't really do much, and he's got one really huge one that really helps him launch himself off the ground. And he's got 2 smaller ones on the inside too. So he can use those for kind of gripping into the ground and projecting himself forward. If they're threatened, they can actually lean back on their tail and they can kick out with that big toe, and it can hurt quite a bit. But honestly, if a wallaby is scared, the first thing they're going to try to do is run away.
How many wallabies are born at one time?
So a mom is only really going to have 1 joey at a time. And that's because that joey has to be inside the pouch, and there's not a whole lot of room for twins in there.
Oh, when is his birthday?
His birthday is July 1st. So he's coming up on 8 years old, kind of a middle-aged wallaby there.
What are the differences between kangaroos and wallabies?
So some of the differences I did touch on earlier, but I can talk about them again. Kangaroos are much, much larger. They can be about 6 feet tall. Well, the big males can. The females tend to be about 4 to 5. And they tend to be a little bit more brown gray or red, whereas wallabies tend to be a little bit more brown.
Is his coat soft?
He's pretty soft, and since William is kind of our social butterfly in the Wallaby yard, when you guys finally get to come and visit us here in Wild Encounters at Brookfield Zoo, you might actually be able to pet him if he decides to come out on the path while you're here.
Does he have a pouch?
He does not have a pouch. Only the girls have pouches. And that's true for all marsupials.
How many wallabies are here in Wild Encounters?
So we have 18 wallabies in our mob, and a mob is what you call a group of wallabies.
Do they all have names?
They all have names, every single one of them.
How do they like to sleep?
Pretty much the standard way. He just kind of flops on his side and just lays down. If it's a very nice day, he might just lay under the tree on a hill in the sun. Otherwise, we do have a heated barn they can go into at any time.
How long do they live?
So generally, they live into the mid to early teens. So between like 11 and 15 is pretty good.
And is that the same in managed care as in the wild?
Generally, yeah, it's pretty similar. Yeah. Kangaroos are a bit longer lived. Kangaroos can live around 20 to 25.
Do they have a winter coat?
Not really. So the area they come from in Australia, it does get kind of chilly, but it gets nowhere near as chilly as it does here. So they don't really grow a very, very thick coat, but their standard coat is pretty thick on its own. And again, if it is really cold, they do have a heated barn they can always go to.
What do they like to play with?
They're not especially playful. They are kind of inquisitive animals, so they like different smells. William does tend to like to play with twigs and things like that. But a lot of our other wallabies are not quite as playful or social. They like to play with each other, really. They'll chase each other or run around.
What's William's favorite food?
Oh my gosh. I guess it depends on the day. He does love, again, just as a treat, he loves mulberries. And he loves noodles too, which is a weird thing. But again, those are only given in very small quantities and just as a treat. But he does have tastes that change over time, so occasionally he'll like different things. And we do try to mix it up here. So while the standard diet for most of our animals does remain the same, we give them different types of what we call food enrichment. So depending on the day, they might get a different fruit or a different vegetable. Just something to kind of mix it up and give them something new every single day.
Do they have any predators?
They do have some predators. So dingoes and foxes, and even the babies actually might be preyed on by eagles as well.
Are kangaroos and wallabies related?
They're very closely related. They're both what we call macropods, and that just means large foot. But again, wallabies don't get nearly as large as kangaroos.
Do you ever need to brush their teeth?
We don't need to brush their teeth, but we do give them dental checkups quite a few times whenever we're doing any other medical procedures. And then we always sort of keep an eye on them. If anybody seems like they're chewing at a weird angle or something, we always want to give them a checkup just to make sure everything's going okay.
Is their tail prehensile?
It is not a prehensile tail. So prehensile means that the animal can grip with their tail and they can hold on to things. This tail doesn't really work that way. It works more as a support. So if he's standing up really, really tall, he uses it like an extra leg to balance. And if he's jumping, he uses it as a counterbalance, so he doesn't kind of fall over one way or the other.
Do wallabies make any noises?
They don't make too many noises. They can growl a little bit. They can make some sort of almost like a chuckling noise on occasion, but that's pretty rare. But nothing too out there.
How can you tell all the wallabies apart?
So one of the ways we can tell these guys apart is they have different ear notches. So we've got little notches on each ear. William unfortunately doesn't have that because we kind of know William just by his face, oddly enough. We can tell him apart pretty easy. But the position of the notches on the ears actually correlates to a number. And we know that, say, Sid, the wallaby, is number 24. She has a notch in the 20 position and a notch in the 4 position. And that's all done by our veterinarians with a little local anesthesia when they're very, very young. So they don't even, it's like getting your ear pierced.
How long do they sleep in a day?
That I couldn't tell you for sure. I believe it's Probably, if I had to do an educated guess, I would say between like 8 and 10 hours. Nothing too far off of what we do. They do spend a lot of time just kind of laying down and digesting their food. They're similar to kind of horses in their digestive system, where it just takes a long time to process the stuff that they eat. I don't know if you guys tuned in for the goat talk that we did a little while ago, but the goats, they eat very, they eat hay, which is not very high in nutrients. And so these guys also eat hay and grasses and things like that. And those are also not really high in nutrients. So they need a lot of time to digest that and get every little ounce of nutrient out of that food that they can.
Can you remind us how far they can jump and how high they can jump?
Yeah, so if they're in a real hurry, they can jump about 25 feet horizontally, and they can jump about 6 feet vertically. If he's just kind of hopping around the yard casually, it's about 6 to 8 feet usually per jump.
And how fast can they, jump?
How fast can they go when they're jumping?
Can they go when they're jumping?
That I don't recall offhand. I want to say something around 20 miles an hour, but I may be off on that. I don't know if... Okay.
How do they communicate with each other?
There's a lot of body language, a lot of posturing. Generally, if a wallaby is angry at another wallaby, he'll stand up really big, try to make himself big and scary. He might even growl. He might try to grab at the other wallaby. If they're friendly, they're just like, if you look at them right now, this is just kind of a casual body language. They know that, if you come over by me, I'm not going to mind it so much.
So how come the wallabies in the back aren't coming up for food like William?
So we have some wallabies that are a little bit more comfortable around people than others. Obviously, William is the most comfortable. But our friends over here, they're okay. They're okay hanging out with us. And they're also getting a few treats on the ground as well, just to, as a reward for hanging out with you guys today.
Are there any joeys right now?
Unfortunately, we do not have any joeys in the pouch at the moment. I don't know if I mentioned it earlier. Joey is what we call a baby wallaby.
Do they have claws on their front feet as well?
Yeah, they do. So we can actually see. Let me see if they'll let me show you. So he's got 5 claws here, and those are mainly used for grabbing onto branches and things like that. Again, in a pinch, if he's scared or if he's upset with another wallaby, they can kind of grab at each other, but they don't really tend to do that much. They tend to try to get out of conflicts by leaving, for the most part.
Do you have to groom them at all?
We don't. They self-groom.
And do they have good eyesight?
They have pretty good eyesight. So they are a prey animal, which means there are predators out there, and they need to be able to see those animals if they're coming after them. So they need to be able to see if a dingo is approaching. So they do have pretty good eyesight, and they have a very good sense of smell as well, and great hearing. So you can see those really big ears too. And those ears can kind of rotate independently, so you can have one going to the side and one going forward, so you can hear if anybody's approaching from any different way.
Can you remind us where wallabies live in the wild?
So wallabies are found in Australia and Tasmania. So these guys are specifically found on the east coast of Australia and a little bit in the south, and then also on the Tasmanian Isle as well. And these guys are Bennett's wallabies, if you guys are just tuning in. They're also known as red-necked wallabies.
Who is our biggest wallaby?
Ooh, our biggest wallaby might actually be the one we call Tiny, I think.
No.
Ironically. No?
Leo, right on.
Leo! Okay. Leo is hiding behind a rock right now.
Can they see well at night?
They don't see the best at night. These guys are crepuscular, which means they're active at twilight mainly. So right when it's starting to get dark, and they see really well in that little section there. They don't have the greatest nighttime eyesight though.
How long are their legs?
How long are they? I have not measured them. I would imagine if you stretched them out, you get about maybe 2.5 feet. But it also depends on the individual animal too. Because even though these guys, tend to stay small, there's some variation in size too. So William's kind of like a medium-sized wallaby. He's about 35 pounds. I would imagine Leo over there is maybe 40, 45, somewhere in there.
Do they box like kangaroos?
In theory they could, but again, they're going to want to run away more than anything. They don't tend to really get into conflicts quite as much, and if they do, they don't really last that long.
Who is the smallest wallaby?
Smallest wallaby? Offhand. Yeah, I honestly couldn't tell you offhand, unfortunately. Next time you stop by, we'll make sure we have that information on hand.
Do they shed their fur?
They do. So it's not all at once, but it's constantly regrowing. It's just kind of like your hair. So it's always growing, and then old hair falls out and new hair grows in. But it doesn't fall out in huge clumps like maybe your dog does when they're getting rid of their winter coat.
Did I already ask if they box like kangaroos?
You did.
Okay,
It's
sorry.
okay.
I'm reading
It's
a lot of
okay.
questions.
It's okay.
Can they swim?
I'm happy to answer. They can, actually, yeah. Wallabies are actually pretty good swimmers.
Does the cold weather bother them?
Not this type of weather. This type of weather, they're okay. It actually does get down even colder than this in their native habitat, since they are found all the way down the coast and into the southern part of Australia where it gets a little chillier. They're not really made for the very, very cold Chicago winter, temperatures. But when that happens, we do have a heated barn they can go into if they choose to. And on some days, if it's super, super cold, we'll actually close the doors and just have everybody stay in there for the night. Just to make sure it gets extra toasty in there.
Can you remind us how joeys are born?
So yeah, when joeys are born, they're actually about 2 centimeters. So gestation is only about 30 days for these guys. And then they crawl out, and 2 centimeters is about the size of a jelly bean. And they'll crawl out and they crawl up to their mom's pouch. And then they stay in that pouch for about 9 months while they're getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And then eventually they'll hop outside and then they'll stick with mom for another maybe 3 to 6 months after that. And then they go off on their own.
How long can they run/jump?
So these guys, jumping is a very efficient process. It doesn't use quite as much energy as you would think it would, and that means that these guys can run for a very long time. Well, hop for a very long time. It's not really running. They really don't walk on their own. So when they do walk, it's kind of like they move their forelegs and then they move their back legs, and they use their tail as kind of an extra leg. Oh, there you can see William is demonstrating for us right now. So it's not like walking like we think of it. It's actually what they call pentapedal movement, and that means 5. Pent means 5. So he uses 5 limbs to walk, whereas we're bipedal because we have 2 legs.
Do the wallabies ever visit the goats?
They have not visited the goats. William, since he is one of our animal ambassadors, he's kind of in semi-retirement. He stays in the yard now, but in the past he has gone around the zoo and visited other animals. But I don't know if we ever had him visit the goats, and even if we did, there'd be a fence in between them.
Why is there a stage? Do the wallabies like to go up and dance on the stage?
The wallabies don't like to go up and dance on the stage, but we have a lot of guests that love to go up and dance on the stage. But that's so we can actually give presentations in the summertime. So we'll come in here, sometimes we'll talk about the wallabies, and sometimes we'll bring in other animals too, like a reptile or a bird or something like that. We can talk all about them.
Do their teeth continuously grow like a rodent's?
They do not. So they're pretty... they grow once.
So how do they keep themselves clean?
So they groom themselves. They can actually they'll kind of groom themselves with those 4 claws up front, and then they'll use their mouth to kind of comb their hair with their front teeth, and they'll lick their fur too. All right. So I think that's about all our time for today. Thank you guys so much for visiting with us again, and thank you for visiting with William. And please tune in at 2 o'clock on Instagram to see the Instagram Live. And as always, thank you so much for supporting Brookfield Zoo.